If you want coffee, it's still in the pot.
Okay.
Fine.
So, Harold, tell me your full name, date of birth, and that sort of thing.
I am Harold Edgar Wadley, January 16th, 1934,
And where were you born?
in a place out in the boondocks called Berry Hill, Oklahoma, just
Ah,
on the old Cherokee Reservation. Part
ah.
of my family on one side, Cherokee Comanche mixed.
So you do have some Native American
Yeah, I'm
background.
about a third.
All right.
And my mother was red-headed and blue-eyed and swear she didn't know any Indians.
That's great. So, how did you happen to come to the Stanley Basin, Sawtooth Valley?
I was district ranger down in Utah, and had always expressed interest to get back to Idaho. My grandpa and two of his brothers stayed about, they were the Indian side, Cherokee Comanche guys, and they left Indian Territory 1896, and you drove through our old homestead at Medicine Lake. They came out and homesteaded at 160 there until the 1910 burns run them out, and some of them died at Kellogg later. And then my grandpa went back to Oklahoma. They came out on a train with a wagon, lumber wagon, and mules and horses. And when the train quit, they unloaded the horses and mules, and that's where they ended up. So to get back, I'd heard stories about Idaho all my life.
Uh-huh.
And so, and my dad, born there in 1900, there at Medicine Lake. So he was kind of getting back, and the district opened up at Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the days when the Forest Service recruited based on horsemanship ability, outdoors, how you were raised and whatever, instead of just modern jazz stuff. And so I ended up there, and the range staff officer on the Wasatch Force at that time was J.D. Hanson, my old best mentor I could ever had, and he had been the range officer on the Chalice Force
Oh.
through all of the sheep battles and everything, and he rode with me a lot, and always. And I had permission from the regional forester, because I refused to ride the Forest Service horse that they had left on the district in Utah. I said, we plowed with those. And so the Bill Hurst, the deputy regional forester, was a ranch guy, raised, and he got me special permission to go by and gave me a $300 limit. Well, I knew all the ranchers, and so I'd take a green broke horse, a real good one. Of course, I rode horses all my life. And so J.D. Hanson says, when I show up on a district, I want one of your horses, because they were travelers. So I left that district and came to Stanley in the winter of 60 to 61, I guess.
60 to 61. And how many years had you been in the Forest Service by that time?
Oh, since 58, 3 years.
So in 3 years you went from employee to ranger?
Yeah, because the ranger in Utah had been threatened with his life and shot at
Oh, wow.
over grazing allotment reductions. They're on the high desert Tooele, and they figured I was just out of Korea, and and I even overheard this in the motel that we were going there, and I wondered why they wanted me to come with them to that district, because I was up in the high Uintas as an assistant ranger, a timber in some range. But anyway, I heard through the thin wall of that windswept motel, they were talking about this ability to take a threat. And says, well, he's been threatened enough, but we don't know his reaction to it. But and of course, I'd been wounded in Korea, you know, shot up and stuff. And they said, well, he's our best bet. And I thought, man, they're scooping to the bottom of the barrel. And so that's how I got to district. And old J.D. Hansen, who'd been on the chalice, super duper guy. Yeah, he briefed me before. He said, now listen. His word said, it's a hornet nest at Tuella. And he says, well, we had 18 cattle and sheep allotments, and all of them were to be reduced. Mm-hmm. And he said the ranger there does not ride with the people. He's afraid of them. He was surrounded at gas station with guys beating on the hood of his truck, daring him to get out of the truck. So he drove through them to get away. So, and he said he's been shot at while out on the range, so he will not ride. So that's what you're going into. He said, what do you think about that? Which is very, I just love that old guy. But I said, well, J.D., pass word to him, before I get there, don't miss. I said, that's what you need to tell them. And so I ended up super friends with the leader of that bunch. He had played tackle. Jack Johnson was his name. He played tackle 10 years for Detroit Lions. And of course, I came, and that's when I got real horses. I got 3 head. And it ended up, I could ride through and leave a tired, worn-out horse in his corral, take one of his, and go on, because it's a 90-mile ride to the south of the deal. I made a lot of those. And I rode with him when they were branding, and they branded on the wild horses, so the wild horses had overgrazed, hadn't been our deal. I said, let's go catch some. I said, you guys all ride? And so I had a half Arab, half thoroughbred. And that rascal, the only reason he couldn't fly, God didn't give him wings. But he could walk up on, had 3 different bands of stud bands. So I said, let's go in the spring when they're weaker. And boy, a lot of them, well, you know, they found some excuse that they didn't want to be there that day except for him. And so, of course, I was razor open, and he could too. He's a good cattleman and savvy about the range too. Jack knew. And so anyway, we just developed that friendship, and I never had problem one after that.
All in your approach in comparison to your friend that was having real issues there.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, and I think that's the key to being a really, really good ranger, is being able to develop those relationships, and you proved it.
Yeah, it's essential, and the other guy, of course, he was not raised like I was. You know, he was, I don't know, he's a good enough person, but as soon as you show cowardice in a situation, why you just rode home. Yeah. So, were you married when you moved to Stanley, and you were married when you were there in Utah? Yeah, yeah. We were married before I got out of college. Gwen graduated and was teaching school.
Oh, okay.
She was teaching school there in Oklahoma, and then I loaded up my hounds and we headed west.
So when you headed to the Sawtooth Valley, you just loaded up and hauled the horses and hounds and wife, and did you have children at that time? Or?
We had one little boy. Rance Allen, and he was sick. And Gwen was driving a Rambler station wagon, and that was a heavy winter. That winter was a heavy winter. We had a U-Haul truck, and when she went over Galena and caught a wheel in the edge of the road, and the car went over the side and rolled over about 3 times. And the little baby Rance, he was kind of bouncing around that, and she was stuck down in the snowbank, and one of the Frank Lanier was on the highway crew, and those guys at Stanley used to, they're the best snow plowers in the world. They'd stand in the back of the truck and shovel sand. They didn't have a sander. They'd shovel it in those days. Well, the Lord took care of that. Truck went up there to turn around, is the end of their plow zone or something, and they rescued her, pulled her out, and got the snow out of the fan belt, and it just packed under the hood. And they followed her on into Stanley to the station.
Wow.
And neither one of them were hurt other than baby, sick and crying.
Sure. Now that's a grand entrance with a lot of help from somebody upstairs.
Oh, you better believe it. Oh, yeah. And I didn't even know it happened. I was coming behind them, and I get into Stanley, and then I get the news, and the state highway crew guys were there, and I thought, what in the thunder are they doing here? Then I got introduced to the Lanier clan. They lived in Upper Stanley. They said they were too good for Lower Stanley.
That sounds familiar even to this day.
I can imagine.
That's great. Wow.
So that's how we arrived in Stanley.
Well, that's sure. My question was going to be, how was the trip? And you just told it perfectly. That was tremendous.
It was a blizzard when we left Utah, and the old heater, that truck wasn't working, and it frosted up inside on the windshield. I was scraping, and I could see the tail lights of Gwen. That's what I focused on, coming across the Bonneville Salt Flats, headed up to turn into Nevada. So yeah, it's typical.
That's great. So you just had the one son that was an infant or youngster?
He was 6 months old. We had our second boy, Reed, was born there at Stanley 2 years later.
Uh-huh. And how did you and your wife like moving into the Stanley Valley Creek Ranger Station?
Oh, it was just kind of like a dream come true, getting to Idaho, and with the well, of course where we started it. Of course, I started on the Gila Forest, New Mexico, out of Korea. When I came back to Korea, I got a summer job on the Gila. But then together, we lived in mostly worked out of the old guard stations when you had working crews on the forest, instead of everybody sitting by a computer. So she cooked for 30 contractors spraying lodgepole pine on the high U. That's when the ethylene dibromide, and had 80 head of mules. We packed, me and Dick Anderson. Dick Anderson was on the Wasatch, and he ended up being a ranger at Haley a few years later. A super guy. He wasn't a horse. He wasn't a horseman on that 70 miles that he and I were assigned when the bug job was over to take that 80 head of mules and horses to the railhead at Lone Tree, Wyoming, to ship back to Afton, Wyoming, to the contractor that owned them. And we only lost 2 mules, and but we'd switch horses. I said, now we got to rope this one horse, catch him out. You can't ride that one, that that far, you know, pushing horses through the timber.
Mm-hmm.
But did you ever meet him, Dick Anderson?
I don't think so. I don't
He
think
was
so.
at his Haley Ranger a few years later, and I never saw him again, but he's
Ah.
super good forester.
Ah. The big family from Mackay that had rangers and various Forest Service positions over the years was the Pence family.
Oh, Pence, yeah.
I thought maybe you might
Yeah,
known
Pence
the
and
Pences.
Rosencrantz, the
Rosencrantz, yeah.
family too are all
Yeah.
good people. Yeah, Pence, what in the world had a story on? There were about 4 or 5 of those
Yes.
kids. And
Yep.
then Andy Finn.
Yep, I knew Andy Finn.
Okay, well, it was a riot. We just all put him out in the barn so we could go to sleep at night on fire camps or ranger meetings or something, because he had 10 million stories, and you know, just funnier than a load. Andy Finn, yeah.
That's great. Maybe I'll see if you can relate some of those stories a little bit later. So, you said you had another child about 2 years into
Yeah.
the position there. How long were you the ranger in Stanley?
I think it's 7 winters.
7 winters.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up a great question. How did you like the winters in Stanley?
Well, I made 2 winters in Korea in the 5th Marine Regiment,
Uh-huh.
and I know what cold is.
Uh-huh.
And so if I didn't freeze to death in Korea, you know, laying there, I think the coldest the thermometer in Korea on Lieutenant Gwen's thermometer was about 32 below. But when you're trying to clear booby traps, of course I was assault demolition,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to take your mittens off to stick your fingers in your mouth when you think this night, of course, and you don't know the difference between burnt rice stubble and the 3-pronged bouncing Betty, if we were 5/8 inches long, and holding a striker to a 40 millimeter, and so you stick your wrist one hand, and stick the fingers in your mouth to get them warm and wet, and then reach for it. If your fingers don't stick to it, it's stubble. If they stick, it's metal.
Ooh.
And then comes trying to get a safety pin in the head of that striker rod. These 3 are clutched on it. But you step on them, they separate it,
Mm-hmm.
and it fires 1/200th of a second 4 feet off the deck.
Yeah.
And nobody ever makes a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we were trained with firecrackers back in the States and blindfolded. It took 2 weeks of blindfold training on it. And if your firecracker went off, you got to dig a grave. And we had lots of holes there at Camp Platoon, but it washed out about 20% of the guys. It just unnerved them
Oh, sure.
too much.
Sure.
And nothing held against them. Gundy says, that's okay, guys, we don't want you trying to do something when a squad of Marines behind you on patrol and you panic. Said that's the wrong time, so you'll go back to your outfit.
Yeah. So that many winters, so your kids got to grow up there in Stanley.
Yep, they learned to swim in hot springs. I think Kovalicki's the one that dozed that full.
The plunge, and Kovalicki is the culprit, and we always give him a bad time about it. But he said he got so sick and tired of the nudity and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still the culprit for destroying that beautiful plunge there that had been popular for 60.
CC's built it.
Yeah, it had been there for years, and it was very, very
CC's
popular.
built it. See, what I'd have done, of course, I didn't have that problem when I was there. I relieved Bob Newcomer, and Newcomer was first class guy. Newcomer was.
Uh-huh.
And but yeah, we'd throw big hunks of snow in it, and the kids would lay on the hunks of snow in it until it melted 104 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
But I told Sam, I said, why in the thunder didn't you salt it with an itching agent or something in the dressing rooms? People sat in there or tried to do that, and just give them all a rash. I said, they won't be back. I said, you got to use your head, Sam. He's talking about it later. And I said, I'd clean them out. They won't come back. But anyway.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So your kids enjoyed the hot springs, I bet.
Yep, they learned to swim in it.
Yeah.
That's where they learned to swim.
That's great.
And yeah, and the other guy who would have, I don't know where Dan Woolley was when Kovalicki had that problem with hippies or that, but there was, he had a bet with, I forget who, Wilbur, up there at the Rod and Gun Club. Oh, Wilbur.
Was it a brewer or
No.
No, no?
No, it's one that Joe Blackburn got for 11 elk.
Mm.
Killed 11 elk.
Ah.
Blackburn nailed a bet. But anyway, he had a bet that he could run and jump his horse over that wall and land in the pool. And there happened to be a bunch of ladies there or something, and Dan had been harassing them anyway up there at the bar, I think. There's more to that story than Dan would admit. But anyway, he did. And he started to jump his horse over, and he landed half on the wall.
Oh my.
And it is a wreck and a rodeo. And of course, Dan Woolley didn't care. Nothing fazed him. But he'd fought in Korea too.
Yeah.
Dan had.
Dan was a very, very, very close friend of Lori's and mine.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Dan just absolutely loved our daughter. He was tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah, I get, well, Brett, his son, I got a phone call about 2 weeks ago from Brett.
Yeah.
Lord Stanley.
We kind of feel like we almost raised Brett.
Okay.
Yeah, after the horrible murder, Brett was a basket case, and we pretty well took care of him there for a long time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, living there at the ranger station, I'm curious what you all did for entertainment. Did you go hunting? Did you go fishing? Just running critters with the dogs? I'm just curious what you did for recreation and free time.
Well, in the winter, we camped a lot. My family did. And of course, we fed Sam. We kept all the fish and game guys alive that were single, because they'd show up every time June James was baking bread. And but that's a different story. But for entertainment, yeah, me and Gwen and the kids skied.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd snowshoe into Redfish Lake and camp. Just set up a iron pot, wok, and cook spaghetti, whatever, and the kids would play on the ice. And then each winter, old Wilbur and Critchfield's, Bud was too lazy, but some of the younger ones, Jay Critchfield,
Mm-hmm.
was younger. We'd go to Little Redfish. It had the best ice, and we'd saw out ice, mark out ice, and then the old filling station down at the bottom of Wilbur. Oh, call him Slim.
I'm struggling with that last name. I know who you mean.
Yeah, anyway, he had a big ice house that he sold ice in the summer, just like we did. We filled up the ice house at the station that had the big 3-foot walls, sawdust in them,
Mm-hmm.
and so we'd go up there and mark out ice, and everybody have a feast, and the women, Miss Critchfield, all of them, and another lady, he died. She's on the road crew also. Generally, the only ones that stayed in the winter were the road crew.
Sure. And you mentioned the ice house there at the station. Did you put ice in the ice house there at the station? Did you keep produce in it? Did you keep meat in it?
Yeah.
What did you...
Yeah, because every 2 weeks, I wish Gwen was here. I think about every 2 weeks there was a good guy came up from Treasure Valley. The kids called him the Vegetable Man. He had produce and everything, and he knew Stanley's kind of isolated, and so he would bring produce to Upper and Lower Stanley to the house. He'd bring it right, and so Gwen would get corn or squash, whatever. Can't remember his name, super guy. But about, I think, every 2 weeks, so we kept that, and of course meat.
Yeah,
Meat.
yeah. So meat, was that game meat?
Yeah, we never bought meat.
Yeah.
We still don't buy meat.
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't have 8 turkeys running down the road.
So did you go out of the valley much? Did you have a car and go out of the valley?
We had that same beat up old Rambler. We went one time all the way to Boise. The kid somewhere, and we didn't have radio, and it wouldn't work in the station in the house because it was metal laths in the wall with the plaster.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time the radio worked, if Gwen pulled the flour bin, there was a tipped flour bin,
Mm-hmm.
pulled the flour bin out halfway and the radio would work. We don't know how that connection was, but the plug-in was up above and figured the metal some way. So, and that's the only time, of course, we didn't have any need to listen to radio except when President Kennedy was killed in 1962. She happened at noon to pull it out to listen to Farm Report or something, and there was the news that President Kennedy had been shot. And that's how Upper Stanley got the word.
From you all?
Yeah, and Frank Stillwell,
Mm-hmm.
there on the district, went around saying, "Did you hear this?" And then we pulled Mr. Gregory, old C.A. Gregory, and Mrs. Gregory. Yeah, that was really a bad day in Stanley. That the president, regardless of who or what, but some idiot shot him.
Yeah, sure was.
And after that, was back to 5 minutes of radio if you pull the flour bin out. TV was an unheard of thing.
Sure. That's a great thing that that flour bin is still there today.
Oh, is it?
That's
Well,
still
pull it
there.
out and plug in the
Plug
radio.
in the radio there.
We'll have to try that.
I might have to try that. That is great.
But recreation was just outdoor stuff, and
mhm.
of course we trailed all the horses down to Chalice and mules. We had 48 head of mules and 16 head of saddle horses, and we trailed them all down to Chalice.
So when you had that many head, were they on pasture right there by the station, or were they Upper Valley, or what?
They were scattered between there and all of the patrol stations, because they patrolled 120 miles of the Middle Fork.
Mm-hmm.
With 3 different patrols, a saddle horse and a mule, and they made them to Loop 10, go back and forth camp and come back, and then the lookouts, would, they'd tie in with the lookouts on
Right.
by radio.
Right.
And then and at Cape Horn, the whole Thatcher Creek Flats,
Mm-hmm.
from Blind Summit on out, was pasture really in the middle of the cow line. Well, that's Bill Jones, the sheep along, and he had, Knapp Creek was a part of private ground of the Jones family.
Right.
And so
Right.
he had stock there, and Seafoam didn't have any pasture really.
Right. Right.
And then down in Little Creek and where's the fur farm, Charlie's fur farmer. Which creek was that?
The fur farmers on Cougar Creek, I think.
No, Cougar. It's a different name. Different name, but anyway, we'd still ride into Black Foxes and you knew, okay, that's when Charlie left in World War II and opened all the pens. A lot of the pens were still there. He just released everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was trying to, even my memory's going, but there was the patrol cabin at the mouth of Cougar Creek, and Fur Farm was up there, and Blue Lake is above Fur Farm.
Yeah.
I've been there numerous times, and I'm trying to...
What was the name of the creek where the airstrip was? That rough, never do it again airstrip.
Well, the one
Not
across
appropriate.
the one across the river was Mahoney, but the one on the cabin side, that was the Cougar Ranch airstrip.
Okay, there's a different name that, man, did you ever know Ed Osterman?
Knew of them,
Oh,
didn't know.
he is the best pilot in the world. That old Fairchild airplane of his, it's like a washing machine motor, you know, you could hear it yong, yong, yong coming, but it had great airlift on those type of wings. And we flew into that, and I could hear the treetops hitting the struts coming into land, and I looked over at Ed, and he was white. And you never saw Ed Osterman white. He'd flown in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he is a pilot and a half.
Uh-huh.
And so I didn't, if Osterman fly, I would go. If it wasn't Osterman, forget it. But there's another, Charlie Creek? No, it's here. That's, I get mountains mixed up.
I've lost it right now. That's I think
all
of
right,
it.
forget it.
Yeah, I'll remember
But
it here.
anyway, there were still remnants of his fur farm animals.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And what was Charlie's last name there? Remember?
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
Can't recall Charlie. But anyway, he had left for the war.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had several different poaching groups live in the remnants of the cabin there, and one of the guys was setting up a camp for poaching illegal outfitter, setting up a camp, and he dropped a tree on himself, and they found him weeks later dead under the tree, right there at Fur Farm.
What, forevermore.
Yeah, that's just a little extra there.
Yeah, that took care of his judgment.
Yeah, yeah. So I used to ride in from over there on the Loon Creek side. I'd ride in down through Blue Lake, and then I've also came in off of Sheep Mountain.
Oh, yeah.
And did you spend much time back in that area?
Yeah, a lot.
And so the Seafoam Ranger Station, that was seasonal, correct?
Yeah, we had an illegal guy that the FBI could never catch. He was on the 10 most wanted list, I think, and he would leave us notes. And we rode into Cabin Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Down there we had the camp frame deal there and work trails, Shorty Conyers and Ed Dudale, two of the best people on the earth. Ed was a packer and a rawhide braider and stuff. He cowboyed down at Nampa in the winter, and Jordan Valley, Oregon. And Shorty, of course, was permit fire control and trail.
And was he stationed at Stanley there, or
yeah? They were all.
That was Shorty
there.
Conyers, right?
Yeah, but the Packers cabin at Seafoam is where they generally live. But this old boy, the FBI never did get him. I don't know, I can't remember why they were after him. But he would come in and utilize the cabins, keep them clean and everything. And like I said, at times leave a note. And we rode in on Cabin Creek, me and Shorty, forget what we were packing in there. But we were right behind the guy, saw him, but never caught up with him. And we thought, who could that be at this time of the year? Well, it had to have been that guy. And to this day, unless Bill James or somebody remember later after I left, he was never caught.
So, do you remember the miner back there in Seafoam? Elmer?
Elmer seems like that. There was a miner at Pungo Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Pungo was on the other side of the Middle Fork, it was on the north side. And he just dry holed everything. We never didn't know if he got anything, and he's just a little bit dingy. And we'd leave sea rations or something every once in a while.
Up there at Seafoam Lakes, there was a Elmer Ogren, and he had the claims and old cabin up there by Seafoam Lakes. I just wondered if you remembered him.
I can't recall.
Yeah.
The lookouts talked about Jim Roughneck
Yeah.
could look down on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you remember any of the particularly cold winters in Stanley? Did the
Yeah.
water freeze up, for example, or what was it like keeping the place warm, that sort
Well,
of thing?
Gwen cooked it a lot with canned milk, and we had a case of canned milk, carnation with the rose on it, or carnation.
Mm-hmm.
Underneath the bed, and when it froze, we closed the door on the bedroom and everything. We moved to we just used one room in the house, closed, because the house would ship, and you couldn't open any more doors after you closed them.
Uh-huh.
And so the kids had their pallets and beds, you know.
So the kids probably didn't sleep upstairs in the
No.
winter. Did they sleep in the dining room, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you use the fireplace at all?
Not much. We just blocked it up so what heat we had wouldn't go up the chimney.
Ah, yeah.
Because it was, more decoration. It's not like his stove.
So by the time you were there, they probably had an oil furnace in there?
And we had oil,
Yeah.
which would blow up every once in a while.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But the cold, you speak the coldest, that next winter, I guess, was the first time anybody, they were from Lucille, Idaho, a sheep rancher, and he was a prospector, I want to say Vera, but she and Gwen were good buddies. Is the first time anybody could ever remember that the river plugged up with ice and heaved out onto the road, highway. And it took out the Casino Creek, Casino Creek Bridge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was the winter that, towards, middle winter, before Christmas, there were 26 slides between Stanley and Chalice. And Christmas, figured, was over, but did you ever hear of, I want to say, Jack Fleming had one leg, wooden leg. He was the mailman. He carried the stage. He ran the stage.
What was the last name?
Fleming.
Oh, of course. Yes. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
he died later, I guess fell in the river. We never did find him.
Yeah.
But he snowshoed with the Christmas package, one for the kid from Ketchum. He came over Galena Summit, and he knew there were kids in Stanley, and he brought the mail. Now, if you can find anybody else can do that with two legs,
Uh-huh.
and he had that wooden leg, and you'll tease the kids with that wooden leg. You'll kick my leg. And of course, they thought that was a big deal, that wooden leg. But yes, sir. I wanted to say Jack or Harry Fleming.
Harry Fleming would have been like his father, I think, maybe?
Yeah, it could be. It's the older, the one with the wooden leg. And Bill said he drove off into the river later and drowned.
Yeah, once you said Fleming, that was a pretty famous family for their mail routes and their freighting, doing the freighting.
Yeah, he had a big freight deal.
Yeah.
He's a tremendous guy.
So who all that you remember worked there at the ranger station? You said that Packer and
Ed Budale and Shorty Conyers, Clifton Conyers.
the big warehouse was still there at that time.
Oh yeah.
Who worked? Who did you have a maintenance crew or maintenance staff, or who
No,
worked?
we just did it all, and in the warehouse, whenever the water system froze up, you asked that question, we'd take the fire hose in the Pacific Marine pump, put it in Valley Creek, and pump to fill the reservoir. And of course, the broom handler went take a broom to sweep the ice and stuff away from the intake on the hose so it didn't lock up and freeze. And then we'd have to have more than one broom because pretty soon the ice get on it so heavy you couldn't sweep clear the intake on the pump. And then as soon as the water was full, why you just had to run and start uncoupling hoses, tried to get them drained, and there was no way that you could. And so we'd hang them in the warehouse, suspend them up, and then we had a big stove in there that we used to heat, had a barrel that we heated for varnish for our snowshoes. We'd get the varnish hot and then dip our webs in those. So we used the warehouse a lot, but those hoses never dried out until August. You know, and you had one chance. And then it sucked up salmon eggs. A lot of times, Gwen and Juice turned on water, and here comes salmon eggs out of the hydrant.
So you mentioned a reservoir.
Yeah.
Where was a water reservoir?
It was up on top.
Was
Up
that
above the slope, above the barn?
far
Yeah.
up there?
Yeah.
Okay. And did they have a well there in the bottom near the place at all? Did you have
No, it's spring fed.
and it spring fed from up on the hill, right? Okay. So you never did have drinking water from in the bottom there.
You know, we never had a well of
Okay.
any kind.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
used that cistern, is a cistern. We'd pour in what we thought was right for Clorox, and Gwen or June, somebody let us know if we put too much Clorox in the water. So it's good for your teeth.
So did Bill and some of the others live in trailers out
Yeah.
behind at that time?
And Frank Stillwell and Bill James and their families were year-round there at the station.
Uh-huh.
And Frank and Bill came in later. At first it was Don Klopfenstein and Art Inez, and they had a log house out by Job Creek. And one of the, you know, the guy, kind of the half lawyer, environmentalist guy that always raising cane or writing something, he bought Klopfenstein's.
Marble.
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 That's it.
Yeah.
That's the name.
So did Bonnie Stillwell work for the forest there too?
Yeah, she came in for a while. The first office manager clerk was Ella Boyle, and she is a ranch family that had a ranch back on towards Sulphur Creek in the early days. And that's when we had the switchboard that she managed for all of our phone lines that went to the Sulphur Creek Ranch and to Jones's at Knapp Creek and that. And then ours was 2 shorts and a long. And she had the pegs for the switchboard, so in the winter everybody could talk.
So was the switchboard right there
In the office.
in the office?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that was Ella Boyle.
Yeah, Ella Boyle. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, she is a tremendous person, and I don't know how old she was when she retired, but she was getting pretty feeble, and we were all worried about her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know, they say, you know, trying to encourage her to, you know, you'd like to do this, but she just felt dedicated that nobody else in the world could do it, you know, but her.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So the office building, did it have a garage or was it filled in at that time? It was all...
Wasn't any garage.
Okay. So it was already, had been modified. And at the station there, behind the woodshed ice house, was there a building back there at all?
No.
Okay. So it was
No,
gone.
we put a trailer in there,
Okay. Yeah.
and that's where Frank and Bonnie Stillwell lived.
Okay.
And then Janine Steele, Fran's sister, out of Chalice, was the last clerk.
And who was that again?
Janine Steele,
Okay.
Sam's wife's sister.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, she just super duper person.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had to stop down by the hot springs one day while the female cougar finished killing elk right in the middle of the road, and her kittens were sitting up on the bank. And she apologized when she came in that she a couple hours late, and I said, I said, that's no big deal. Did she have a flat or what? Or hit a rock, how the rocks in the road. And, no. And then she told me, and I said, were those kittens still there? She said, yeah, the cat drugged the elk halfway out and then turned around and walked up and looked right in her face at her driver's window. And she said, I think it was time for I could drive and get around that elk. And so I grabbed the dogs, and Bill and I went down, and she drugged that cow elk back up the bank underneath some trees. A bank as high as this window, cut bank. And so I turned 2 dogs loose and pushed her back up, and then ran the kittens up a tree and beat on the tree and hollered at them, and then brought the dogs back. And then went back the next day, and she had moved tracks, so she took the kittens and headed out. So there'd be some dip come along and shoot half of them.
Yeah, right. So speaking of wildlife, did any elk winter there in Stanley?
No.
They all pulled out?
We had to hunt hard to find elk.
Mm-hmm.
And we hunted.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the elk, there just wasn't that many elk at all.
What about in the Middle Fork country?
Yeah, Middle Fork was good.
Okay.
Middle Fork good. All from Hard Scramble down underneath Roughneck and Little Soldier peaks. As you drop on down into Rapid River, all that back through there had enough shade and humidity that the grass fed better than the elk.
Yeah.
In there.
That deep is better, okay.
Clear back in that hard scrabble country, it was still good elk hunting until the department allowed the outfitters to overhunt it.
Oh.
That's hard scrabble country. It worked out a lot. And the Yankee family owned the Greyhound mine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I worked back in there a lot. Yeah. So, did your kids go to school? Did they get to school age and go to school in Stanley?
Yeah, Gwen helped. Mrs. Williams was the teacher up in that Quonset hut. And Rance, our oldest boy, the little boy didn't, I don't think Reed might have started there. But Mrs. Williams was the teacher, and I forget which of the Critchfield kids was in James. But generally everybody, from upper grades all went to Chalice.
Uh-huh. And when they went to Chalice, they lived down in Chalice?
Yeah, they lived with families, stayed with families.
Yeah. So I don't know if you did any partying or any hanging out uptown at any of the establishments, or in Lower Stanley for that matter. Was there much partying or gambling or people that hung out at the bars?
Well, in the summer, there was the summer crowd, which we were, too busy for that. In the winter, there wasn't but a handful of us, and there would be some card parties, things like that. And Wilbur's Rod and Gun, and Joe Williams had the filling station down in Lower Stanley, and he would have some cronies come in, but it was pretty. Stella, the lady, and he was
Stella Critchfield.
Yeah, well, Stella Critchfield, Stella, but there was another lady in Lower Stanley that was just precious. They were old sheep herders from Lucille, Idaho.
Ah, okay.
And he was a miner. He was always going to strike it rich. And he's always asking me, what glitter did I see pulling mules through the country. Did you see anything kicked up? Well, no, Slim. I can't think of his name. And then old, another, wasn't Nitzy, I keep getting that name mixed up, but he trapped. And he's the one that got a wolverine out at Stanley Lake.
Craig Rember?
No, Craig, I had Craig and them, and his wife, and of course, Billy Rimmer was one of my crew, worked, and he's a professor down at U of I.
Right,
He
right.
comes through here once in a while, and Craig and his, what's his mom's name, they came through a few years ago before they died.
Betty.
Betty.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a slight confrontation with Craig, because I snowshoed and had trails all through, and then, of course, I ran leaks every winter, and somebody said there's no leaks in this country. I said, I got news for you. I treed several, and the dogs caught, and that's the only cat I've ever run, whether Wyoming, Utah, or wherever, that would stop and wait on the dogs.
Oh.
They are bad news. I mean, they got a mouth on them. One night, it echoed out across the ice of Stanley Lake. You'd have thought it was African lion. And the dogs had pushed him enough, and of course he's on the snow, and they're wading snow, but they just kept on him, and he got aggravated. And he turned and scalped one of my dogs, old Bo, hit him right in the top of the head, and just turned it right over his eyes.
Oh,
like
my.
you take a stocking cap off. And blood, of course, everywhere from that scalp wound. And in fact, I saved a piece of his hide. That's the only one that the dogs killed.
So what drainages were you finding lynx in?
Well, of course, I webbed all through there in the spring after bear, and that ahead of Iron Creek was a denning area for lynx.
Mm-hmm.
Always found kittens in that, and the old female, I know I'd treat her, I don't know how many times, but I'll show you that hide
Okay.
in a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But they're the best cat on the planet. But Craig was running my web trails that I had packed down, and he is trapping lynx.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pulled all of his traps and hung them in a tree and left him a note. And he never trapped on my lynx country again.
There's been a lot of speculation, and I'm one of the ones that speculated it, that Craig was probably the demise of the lynx up there.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Because he didn't know where they were until I made the mistake. Of course, Mr. Gregory was the news leaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to show you, he gave me 3 old classic pictures of his when I left there. I've got them downstairs on the wall. But yeah, we figured that he's the one that Craig was visiting. Well, where does he go with his dogs and stuff? And then he picked, of course, I snowshoed. I wasn't driving anywhere. There wasn't any road to the highway there, Highway 21 or whatever it is, to Lowman and all that. That road wasn't there then.
Right.
Me and John Shivers located that road.
Oh.
That's how the road is where it is. We pulled all the stakes.
Ah.
It was right up the valley through the tent trailer, the Triple T of Silva.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Went right through that, and Bob and Kotze Young that had the home place, the old Mahonies, they were part of the Mahonies.
Yes, yes.
Okay, went right through their irrigated pasture to the sheep holding ground and out. And everybody was, said, what we do, what we do. And we had all kinds, that's the Bureau of Public Roads at that time. And there was one guy in an old World War II guy, and I can spot him, Harold Tilsey. Backed me up, didn't say a word after he found it. And anyway, this story here, and the Stanley Basin Cowboys, Shivers Bunch and Pivas and Bain Stark, Salt of the Earth guys, came to me and says, gosh, he said, what happened at that last meeting? He says, they've surveyed and staked right up to, and I says, well, that's their plan, and had the aerial photos and everything, and so we went out with them and looked and couldn't believe that, gosh, you guys, the only flat ground and meadows and you know, people living here, you got all outdoors to build a road. And so I rode into cow camp a couple of days later and didn't have phones with them. They had a phone like that one there on the wall. And I said, John, we need to ride. John Shivers was the younger brother of Tom and him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he figured we was going to chase bears. They said, what in the world? What have you got? Where's your dog? I said, no, we don't need dogs. And I had 2 gunny sacks tied on it. He said, what's sacks? And I'll show you. And so we pulled every surveyed stake all the way out to Blind Summit. And I said, now we got a road to locate. And I said, here's the, I had my saddlebags full of flagging, tape rolls. I gave him about 6 rolls. I said, now he said, well, that bench over there, and I said, you're right. I said, that's where we're headed. So we went back to Stanley Creek where it came in, and John would ride out ahead, and I'd say, okay, left, right, you know, and so forth. And we, long story short, we flagged it all the way to Banner Summit.
That is a fantastic piece of history there.
All the way there, and then Sherm Mosley, another tremendous guy with Bureau of Public Roads, was the project manager. He moved into Stanley and was going to start building, and Ty Lorshaw, Norwegian road builder, crooked as a dog sign, like he got the job. Well, Sherm showed up and called Tilsey and says, that road's flag said it's not surveyed. And I figured it's going to hit the fan now. And Sherm was coordinating with me on cattle or whatever. He says, they're supposed to have that surveyed. And I said, well, you've got ribbons. And he said, we've got it. He told Tilsey. So Tilsey came up from Boise. And here's his aerial photos. And I'd already talked to Tilsey. I said, you guys are doing the dumbest thing ever. I said, and he says, well, he said, that's what the road locators on the aerial photos. And I said, yeah, but look at it, Tilsey. I said, look what this is going to do. And so, like I say, he was an old salt. And so when he came, then they called me for a meeting. Okay, what about this and that? And I said, well, you need to survey it. I said, it's real simple. I said, you got a flag line. And Mosley says, well, I can get a surveyor crew up here tomorrow. And Tilsey kind of looked at me and didn't say a word. And he says, do it. And so Sherm got it surveyed, and then we went out and located the overlooks, and I can witch water, and at the Thatcher Creek oversheet thing, we need a well out there. Bill Jones needs to water sheep, and somebody needs a drink, and so they drilled wells and they put in the deal. And Frank Stillwell and Bill James and I made a template for a 5-inch lodgepole, cut it out of plywood. We marked 2,600 and some holes. That's how the logworm fence got built.
Wow.
We marked every snowshoe Wolverine. And so we got, I don't know what Sam was thinking. Sam was involved with that, or one of the guys. Good night. Was there a fishing game? Marshall or Marsh in the fishing game out of Boise. His fisheries guy, I think. But he was up several times on the Middle Fork deal, and he got a whole plane load of poached Dolly Varden, and we were in there working on the bridge and stuff, and he hung them outside on the little creek cabin. And we said, gosh, you don't bring those in? He said, oh, no, they're fine, they're fine. Well, daylight, Martin had come in eating all of his evidence.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and he didn't have a case. And we just rolled in laughter. We said, okay, now you're going to take those skeletons. And of course, Martin had carried off half of them. But that was, Martin, there's a good night, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, Bill Goodnight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bill Goodnight. Okay, it was the other one. I thought Marsh, he was kindly the governor's spokesman or something. He worked in the governor's office.
Mm.
But anyway, that was a funny deal.
Yeah.
All those Dolly Varden for evidence in the Martindale.
So, since you mentioned Fish and Game, Sam McNeil, of course. Who else went through Stanley there that you remember from fishing? Jerry Neufeld. He was my boss at Coeur d'Alene when I worked at MacArthur Wildlife Management Area.
Yeah, he helped put this house together.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Jerry, he's salt of the earth guy. When he was married and had the family there, and
I heard stories about him in the bars in Stanley.
a little bit. It wasn't. There's more rumor than there was truth.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I knew Jerry well. Yeah, he was at the house a lot. And like I say, we fed all the fish and game guys and thawed them out in the winter at a little cabin. But the nemesis of Sam was old Vic out of Salmon, the supervisor, fish and game supervisor at Sandy. Vic or Nick? Nick. It was Nick.
I can't.
Yeah, tall guy. Man, I know his name as well as do my own. What in the world? But anyway, he scared Sam to death. He was on, and when you mentioned the bar, he's the one at the bar. Yeah, he Nick Blackburn would know. In fact, I just got a letter from Blackburn with the magazine, Smoke Jumper magazine. The other day.
Well, I need to catch up with Joe someday and do an interview on him. That's a fact. That's for sure.
Yeah, Nick. Well, I know it's Nick. But anyway, he would come in and he kind of put Sam in a threatening deal about this, that, and the other, and he always about half stewed. And then Sam was brand new and figured, gosh, you're going to get fired. And I said, no, Sam, just let it roll off of your back. And he said, can't do that. He says he comes in and puts all of his gear in that cabin in the kitchen there at Lower Stanley. And said, I can't get away from him. And he came in and he says, he eats all my treats. Sam's mom, tremendous lady, would send him care packages, cookies and stuff. And old Nick come in, man, I nearly had his name. And eat everything up and then fuss about it and all that. And I said, well, we can cure him of that, Sam. And how? I said, have your mom send you up some donuts or whatever it is, and we'll lace them with X-Lax. I said, we'll load that thief up, and he's going to think your mom's the worst cook in the world. And we did.
Oh, and you did?
And it kind of hit the fan, literally. But that's and old Nick couldn't figure out, and Sam, well, probably something you ate up there at the bar. He said, that beer, green beer will do it. He said, I bet it's green beer. and he got the guys up at Stanley at the bar, Rod and Gun Club, I think it's called, to use that story. Man, we've had green beer up here, what you? And so that kept Sam out
of trouble.
But he figured, well, I think there's something in those cookies or chocolate fudge, or I think it's chocolate fudge. Yeah, that's what we specified. So it'd go with that chocolate extract. But that cured him. But he gave another thing he pulled on him was Sam wanted to get pictures of some of the cougar we treed. And he didn't have one, so he got the Fish and Game camera out of salmon from this same guy. And he said, "Now I want pictures," gave all these orders and everything. And okay, Sam, let's go. So we treed one, and the cat swam across the river above Casino Creek. And we went down to the bridge and crossed over, and they, of course, had the cat up. And a lot of times a cougar will urinate when they're up in a tree, and I think it's on purpose at the dogs. I really do. I think it's timed. I've treated a lot of them.
Yeah.
Or a person, and I got to know some of the cats. They just look at me like, okay, that type of look. You can tell the difference in a mean look and one that isn't. And so, I forgot to tell Sam. And so Sam has his high expensive camera. He comes up under the tree, and that old Tom cuts loose, and of course, and it just hits Sam with stocking cap, and he's stomping his hat in the snow, and that camera got splattered, and he's trying to get snow. I said, "Sam, just leave it like it is. You're never going to clean that with that." And anyway, he was more worried about his stocking cap. And long story short, we cleaned it up, and Sam said, "I got to get this back to salmon." And so we got the film out, going to get it, and then he took the camera back just all we could wipe off, and stuck it in the next drawer.
Smell?
and they couldn't figure out what this odor and stuff was. And here it's in his desk drawer all winter. And so Sam figured he got some vengeance on him over that. But the guys in the salmon office then kind of figured it out later and says, "Dad gums, what did you guys do?" And Sam said, "Well, it was an accident." And But anyway, who's it never asked Sam to get any more cougar pictures.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'll think of that guy. But he wasn't a good representative of anybody. Blackburn knows him well.
Okay. So on a slightly different subject, where did your family do shopping? Where did you get your you said the vegetable man came in from over the hill, but where did you all go for groceries?
Well, we stocked up. Gwen was a farm girl, and stocked up on and canned. She canning stuff there now, and so we canned a lot of those things that were brought. And then for what we bought, like a case of Carnation pet milk, Twin Falls.
Twin Falls. Okay, you went to Twin Falls.
Yeah, we went to Twin Falls.
So the store in Lower Stanley, I suppose that was the Markle store then, or?
Yeah, there wasn't much of a store.
Yeah, wasn't much for supplies there.
Joe Williams, no, you couldn't get supplies there. Joe Williams tried to bring stuff in the summer at his filling station just for the run of salmon fishermen, but is all towards the fishermen.
Yeah. Speaking of fishermen, did you all fish for salmon?
No, I honestly never did. But I carried a lot of them out of the horse pasture that come up the irrigation water if we didn't get it shut off. And the big old Chinook, would throw them out and back in the river and then shut. But they'd break the drop boards that we had, that mother stream that they could smell, and they'd hit that thing. And so we had a hard time keeping them out of the pasture there in Stanley. I've seen that thing just salmon all over it.
So when you're speaking of that pasture, is it the one on the other side of the road down along the water, or is it
Well,
up behind?
It's between Valley Creek and the warehouse.
Oh, okay.
And on the other side of Valley Creek, past the swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
the hut.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
hut, you know,
Yeah. Okay.
That's about 8 acres.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but old Frank Church, he demanded fresh salmon there when we were starting wild and scenic river stuff. I was involved with that to start with, and whether a national park or a wilderness area, all of that hassle. And so I got a hold of Sam. I said, hey, we got to catch a salmon. You're speaking of catching salmon, that's the only one we ever caught. And he said, well, the senator wants a salmon. Of course, it wasn't salmon season. And so we got a big steelhead.
So it wasn't salmon season, but you got him a big steelhead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for steelhead, did you have to go down below Sunbeam, or were there steelhead up higher?
Yeah, they'd come right on up. The good place at Torrey's Bend, down through there at the
Yeah.
other fishermen, the Dead
Yeah.
Man's Rock, they called it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guys that get in a fight and fall off of that rock. That
Mhm.
Could have just wall to wall with fishermen. I couldn't fish like that.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it is now, but now there's getting to be so few fish that there isn't that good a.
Yeah, we could
Isn't
lay in
that good
bed
fishing?
there at the station and listen to them make reds in Valley Creek, just flop, flop, flop,
Here
flop.
splashing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And down at Dagger Falls, sit there and band salmon, you know, just like you see Alaska.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then right pull a string of mules across that one Taylor's Rock, and old Sal Bear's been down there at the Cubs, and there's no room to pass.
So down in Dagger Falls, the road was in there when you were there,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Came in from Bear Valley.
Bear Valley Road. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, was there a church at all in Stanley?
No, we had one, well, yeah, there was. It used the Quonset hut.
Oh, okay.
Used the Quonset hut.
Okay. Yeah. Did you have to travel out of the area for church, or just
No, that
went
fed
there?
us all.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we used.
So was there any medical personnel in the valley?
Not to my knowledge.
Was Betty Rember a nurse? Do you know?
Yeah, I think Betty was a nurse.
Okay.
But we never had, well, my boy Reed, the second boy was born there, he had a compound fracture of the right femur. And June James we was on the fire and gone. But they was playing up on the old corral gates and stuff, and he got a leg through it and fell over backwards. And he spent time in Sun Valley.
Ah.
And I made him a little sled, like a mechanic sled, with wheels on it, so he could wheel around all in the house until his leg healed.
Leg healed. Yeah. So I'm wondering if there was much politics. Did the county get involved in the Forest Service at all there? Because it seems like nowadays the county's got to have their thumb on everything the Forest Service does. Was there any
I
involvement that
never
way?
heard of them.
Okay. So you didn't have the county commissioners beating up on the Fort Ranger or anything?
No, I had good relationships with all of them. I barely knew them.
Ah.
They were supposed to be, well, like on search and rescue, you know, finding people. The sheriff, I knew him, and I'm trying to think of his name. And he wasn't one for saddling up and riding now all night to go get somebody or something. And so we took care of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they worked about a half a day on one case. A family from Jerome had lost, he was a prospector. And they knew he'd gone up, I think, Elkhorn Gulch down below Stanley. And snowing hard. And the guys from Chalice all went home.
Ah.
And so I circled the ridge and picked up, because I'd seen diggings where I knew, you know, somebody's looking for gems or what gold.
Mm-hmm.
And so I headed for that. And just before dark, and I had hot cocoa and some food and a blanket and aspirin and different things. I kept a kit. And I saw this round shape right on the skyline of this sharp ridge, and just say, I knew there's no logs on that ridge. Looked like the end of a log.
Mm.
And so I webbed on over there, and it was the individual, and the snow had filled around me except the very crown of his hat was what I was looking at.
Ah.
And so I rolled him up in a tarp, and me and my guys got him back to the station, and they came after him. And a year later, a lady pulled in at the station, a real nice lady, and pleasant, said, I brought your tarp back.
Ah.
So I said, well, you could have kept it. But she thanked us, for that.
Yeah, yeah. So there wasn't any resident deputy. They would just come from Chalice.
You know, they never came up.
They wouldn't even come
I
up.
never saw the closest thing to police was Dan Woolley,
Ah.
and he gave rules. His dad and I were really good buddies. He's my bear hunting buddy, old Bill
Mhm.
Woolley was.
Bill, yeah.
And even at his age, man, I'd look back and he'd be right behind my. In fact, he gave me a pair of, I got him snowshoes, lace for powder, real fine. I'm making my own. I make my own rawhide,
Mm-hmm.
and so I got to lace some webs. But yeah, Bill Woolley was just something else. When I went back in the Marine Corps, he wrote a letter, and he used quill, goose quills, the only thing. And his penmanship would be a classic thing for Shakespeare. You've never seen anything written like Bill Woolley could write.
Ah.
And he wrote a letter to a Marine captain who he had guided him on the Middle Fork hunting. And I want to say Axe Wider. But anyway, I'll think of that name at 3 in the morning. And I didn't know anything about it. And I was sitting in the mess hall at Camp Pendleton getting ready to head to Vietnam. And this captain, somebody points over, well, that's him. And I didn't know what kind of news this guy was bringing, And he came up and introduced himself. And he says, you know Bill Woolley? And I said, sure do. I said, how is he? He says, look at this. He sat down beside me on the bench. He said, I got a letter of introduction about you. And he says, you better get over and meet him before he leaves. And so this captain did. That's the type of guy Bill Woolley was. And I recognized that just beautiful penmanship. And I said, you know how he wrote? He said, yeah, I know, that's a quill.
That's tremendous, yeah.
But back to the sheriff, Dan would give rules there that, all right, you don't start fights in the bar, you go out the street, and I'm going to draw a line, and here's town, and on the other side of that, you can kill each other. He says, not here. And Dan could whip about 83 guys that there was, so they paid attention.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's kind of laugh between me and Dan. I like razz him all the time. Of course, he's in the Army in Korea.
Did you ever hear the stories about Bill Woolley's pet lion?
Oh yeah, Cleo.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, she was there, and they got her hauled out. He said, and the story that how he got it is the story that the writer. He's a famous writer and stuff that Bill guided in on elk hunts. I have a picture of Bill Woolley with a quarter of an elk slung over his shoulder on snowshoes, just like it weighs 10 pounds. And but this author sent him a letter that is sending him a present that pick it up at the railhead and catch him. Do you know that story?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then he packed Cleo with a soft chunk of firewood wrapped in her mouth so she couldn't bite, and managed her up and packed her to Stanley. And that's how she got, and Bill said she got, of course, upsetting neighbors by roaring, by of course, males do more roaring, but they can all bawl.
Mm-hmm.
And it killed one of his steers. That's why he got a hold of the zoo at Pocatello. Remember? Said he played that steer, and steer would come up, and she'd stay back on her chain like she couldn't reach it. And then finally she had it measured, and then hit him between. Said, "You've never seen anything drop so fast." But I knew Roger. Roger was his pet black bear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That you go over, of course, that log house of Bill's was low. You get in there, and I don't think he had electricity, he had a lamp. And it's dark, and I could smell that bear. And there's old Roger there, and they would sidle up, kind of half asleep and stuff in the winter, and of course with people talking. And he says, "Don't take your dogs up Four Aces Creek." I said, "What's up Four Aces Creek?" He says, "That's where Roger goes."
Oh.
So he said, "Don't run Roger, don't tree Roger." But finally, the reason I don't know, he wouldn't have shot him, but I think he ran him off by shooting at him or something, because he says his table manners got out of hand.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
He bit at him one day when they were eating supper together, he said. But Bill Wooley could tell the story to you. His tears run down your eyes. His slow way, I said, he says, and I reached for mine, and he says, and Roger thought his was better, and he reached for mine too. But he said, that's what happened to Roger.
Uh-huh. Okay, well that helps, because those are gaps in a lot of stories, and that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, that's really
He was my
great.
bear hunting buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And he died, got a letter years later from Dan that Bill always went and had a cedar water bucket. He went down to the river, dip water. And at that age in the week and spring runoff, I think it was, I think it's spring. And I figured that, I think they found his coat there at the river. And no water bucket, so the river took him.
That was like 1973, I believe.
Could have been.
It was the year of the big high flood, big flood year.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Harold, can you tell us a little bit about your military career? You were in the military before, and then Forest Service, and then you went back in the military. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, I left high school in the 11th grade and enlisted. Because, of course, I was a ranch kid, and there were 6 of my family. Well, my grandson now, he just got back in Lithuania, for crying out loud.
Mm.
And my son, Marine Corps sniper, and 6 of us in our family were Marines.
Uh-huh.
And one of them was shot down on Bougainville.
Mm.
And so, and a lot of them then, at that time when Korea started, there were all these guys getting draft deferments for F'ers, because they needed to be on the ranch or farm. They no more, and they were all, and it just really, really infuriated me with my cousins and them that just hung saddles in the barn and off they went, And so I got permission to enlist and went on in to Korea with 5th Marine Regiment and assault demolition, the old satchel charges and pole charges and all of that for assault stuff. And occasionally we were qualified in a lot of things. We got $50 extra a month for the hazardous stuff that we did, which was big money to us. And everybody that was in combat got $25 a month extra pay. I think pay was $127 a month. So we were rich. And so us assault guys got $75. And some of my buddies would fuss about it. We'd say, "We'll trade you."
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of shut down the arguments.
Yeah, for
But,
sure.
yeah, great buddies. I just sent a package to Lieutenant Colonel Drummond. He was one of the platoon leaders, had super duper guy. And Buddy Kelly, he was my teammate, or generally two of us, assault stuff. And he's blind. He lives over at wrestling. Now, and all of the concussions from close explosions and stuff has affected his eyes. And he phoned me about a month ago. He's 6'4", he has a long drink of water from cowboy from Wyoming. And in the winter, to keep her feet warm, after the guys came out of the frozen chosen up there, it was the court martial and Marine Corps get frostbite. And because we had trained, okay, here's what you do, you keep your toes moving, you do this, and you sit with a buddy in the trench line or with his arms underneath your coat, and you warm his feet. Well, Kelly's 6'4", and feet about like that. And here I am, I said, Kelly, I'll freeze to death before I can warm up your dadgum feet. And the same thing in digging holes. I said, I got mine dug, Kelly. He said, no, we don't. We got another 2 feet to go. He's that type of guy, but he phoned and said the Veteran Administration was sending him to Tacoma to learn how to be blind. I said, Kelly, I can save you and the VA money and you a trip. He said, oh, okay, how? I said, turn your lights off, Kelly. And he says, gosh, I'm glad I called you. So we were, in fact, my oldest boy, his middle name, Alan, is after Alan Kelly.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, we went through all types of enjoyment together, and Colonel Drummond back there phoned him last week, and he can't remember things, and he's fallen a lot. But Nancy, his wife, says he doesn't know me half the time, but when you guys phoned, says he's right, he knows exactly who and what, and I still, and when I called him, he's in Virginia, it would have been 10 days ago, he says, don't bring it up. And I said, well, how could I forget it? And what it was, he picked Kelly and I up off of a raid one night in his old beat up, like a Jeep, armored personnel carrier. And so we got in, he's taking us back to the unit, and Kelly sat up front because his legs so long, and I sat on the beat up back seat in between the two, and I carried a Thompson. And I sat in there, the Thompson was half asleep, and my inner map says, we made a wrong turn. And so it woke me up, and of course the fog going through, clear, and then it'd be fog and clear. And so Drummond was driving slow. We went out and made this left-hand turn, which he should have made a right. We drove right into Chinese lines. And doing fog clear, here says 3, one's cooking, one's got a pot cooking, the other 2 are cleaning a 76 millimeter recoilless rifle. And they have the cleaning rod jammed out, and they looked up, and here's these dumb Marines. And they couldn't believe what in the world was going on. They were dumbfounded, and boy, I raised that Thompson up, and it's the only time Drummond ever cussed me. He'd get sometimes so tipped off over things I'd challenged him on, but anyway, he said, boy, don't blankety blank shoot through my windshield.
Oh my gosh.
And we razzed him. They're not only getting us lost, but you thought more of that dadgum windshield than you did those 3 gooks at that 76 that's getting ready to blow us off the road. And then when I called him here recently, he says, don't mention it. He said, I have a map that can show you where. I said, Drummond, we don't need your map. You were lost. He says, yeah, no, anyway, that's the first thing he says, don't mention it. But anyway, Vietnam, same thing there, we had all of the Jane Fondas and Joan Baez is laying down on the railroad track. I wish he'd laid down from my old green Ford, protesting this, and there were talks of drugs, a lot of marijuana, and guys not doing what, to go out and just hide in the brush and smoke weed and didn't complete their missions or patrols, and that pertained most generally, it was all Army talk. But I thought, gosh, guys, and of course we didn't have television, nothing in Stanley, we just get a week-old paper from Twin Falls. And Gwen and I prayed about it a lot for a month or more, and said, no, the old guys out of Pacific helped keep me alive. Those guys off of Guadalcanal and Evo were my platoon sergeants in Korea. And I said, I owe these guys. And so I wrote a letter to Commandant General Green and told him, what I felt like doing. And this is 13 years after I was discharged from Korea. And and I was 33 and with the family. And like I say, the Lord took care of the whole thing, and He got me back too. That's the only way I lived to get out of that hole.
So
but I got a phone call a week later, and a colonel asked me, the only thing, he said, we got your letter. I said, good, sir. I said, what about it? He said, we've got one question. Of course, they'd check probably with Drummond's and whoever else in the outfit. Said, are you still in shape? And I said, yes, sir. I'll tell you what, you put a 50-pound sack of rocks on your back, and I'll put them on mine. We'll see who gets to the ridge line first. And he says, good enough. And in 10 days, I had direct orders for Vietnam back. I'd requested to go back to my old outfit, but not as soul demolition. I said, any of the weapons thing's fine, but I said, I want no more to do with all the booby traps and frozen pins and stuff. And so, I got direct orders, and they says, where do you want your family moved? And we had a position in Wyoming. And so Gwen and Sam helped loaded up the U-Haul, and we stuck Sally, that little mare of his, in a trailer and that he'd given to kids, and they went there, and I flew into, he said, we have new weapons that you aren't familiar with, and said, that'll be at Camp Pendleton, you'll hook up with an outfit that'll get you to your old outfit. And so went through that for 2 weeks. The M60 and the M79, great, some of those weapons. And stepped out at Da Nang and got on a truck to the old outfit.
And what was your position?
Well, I asked to stay. I went back in as a private first class. I said, I need to be with the troops.
Oh, okay.
In my letter, I says, these guys do not need an officer in their way. I said, the guys that's doing the fighting and are dying on those bandits are these troops. And I said, I need to be there with them if that will help them.
Wow.
And so he honored it. And so when I got to Camp Pendleton, the colonel showed up in the Jeep and said, the CO wants to see you. It's Lieutenant General Fields. He had been a battalion commander of mine in Korea. And he said, what are you doing? And he says, he offered me the wildlife and forestry management position at Pendleton. And I said, sir, I have orders from the commandant. And he looked at that colonel, and Colonel nodded, yeah, he does. And he says, well, keep your blankety-blank ass down. He says, you keep it down.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And that was the end of it. And I stepped out there. But when I got there, of great bunch of guys. Man, those 19-year-olds they were something else. But the gunny guitarist of it, he looked at my serial number, and he says, "You're older than I am." And I said, "That's right." But we had been in one of the same battles together in Korea. He had stayed in.
Ah.
And so going, we just, I said, "Okay, Gunny, here we go." And, anywho, after a couple of firefights and that, Captain Bowers, who, man, he's colonel now, he's in a nursing home in Florida, and I just sent him some dried apples. He says, I want you to take over the weapons commander. I said, I don't want any field officer, temporary assignment. He said, "Well, you were a sergeant in Korea, right?" I said, "Yep." He said, "You're now a sergeant."
Oh.
He said, "You can stay at the troop as a sergeant, but you're the commander of the weapons company." And so that's what I ended up until shot up and medevaced.
So you one tour?
Yeah, and that's the other thing. My orders were just for Vietnam. And I had to show those to Lieutenant General Fields. I said, and he couldn't believe, he said, "God," and that's when he says, "You keep your down, because I want to see you back."
Yeah, that was really something that you wanted to do. You desperately wanted to do that.
Great bunch. We lost so many.
Yep.
Yeah, I still hear from, in fact, both of my guys out of Korea and Vietnam, we talk frequently. They call or send a letter. One of them from West Virginia, one of my machine gunners, called about 2 weeks ago and wanted to know which side of the grass I was on. And I said, "It's green fish."
Yeah.
Said they fill up fish.
So when you came back, did you go back in the Forest Service? Or?
When I got back, I had a lot of hospital time. About 9.5 months in different hospitals. I wrote the Forest Service to see if they had a position, and they had one in Denver, down in Region 2, to locate a trail from the airport at Denver to Durango, Colorado. They call it Colorado Mountain Trail.
Okay.
And they have it now, but I located that.
I see. Okay.
So I got to stay away from everybody. It's camp all the way, and we bought a place in Lakewood, Colorado, and then aerial photos and all that, and mapped it and hooked in with the local forest guys because they knew the ground. And that's how that trail, you'll see it mentioned on TV every once in a while.
Okay.
The Colorado Mountain Trail. And then, me and the regional forester and some others did not get along. And I can spot a phony 10 miles off, and and he had been on the Chalice too, which is known in the Persimmon as the Ranger Bill. Oh gosh, he's known as Captain Billy at Persimmon on the Chalice after World War II. He'd been in the Army. How could I forget that guy?
Bill, I think I know who you mean.
He was regional forester at Denver, and
actually, I can't believe I can't say his name. There's actually a highway cleanup section with his name on it, and I was in the Forest Service. Not to get off subject here, but I was in the Forest Service, and I went to Bear Lake to their new employees tour. And he came up from Ogden and gave the spiel there, and he really turned me off. His spiel was, "You're now in the Forest Service. Your personal ethics don't matter. Your and I was a wildlife biologist.
Yeah.
Your wildlife ethics don't matter. What matters is the Forest Service ethic.
Whoa.
And that, you know,
That fixed me real quick. Anyway, I met the same guy, but he and I just...
I'm sure it's the same guy, and he was on Chalice Forest
Yeah.
too. I can't
Yeah,
say.
he was the most, and I told him so. He would lambaste people just publicly.
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep,
this,
same
and,
guy. Same guy.
Yeah, I just don't ever.
Oh, I
I
can't
told him,
believe it.
don't you ever speak to me that way. And I was supposed to go to a big deal in Keystone, Colorado. The Undersecretary of Ag, there was a scandal about him and the ski areas and the paybacks and no permits not necessary, this type of thing, several years ago. And this regional forester says, you go there and more or less be available, whatever. And another guy there in the office says, that is a setup. He says, that is a setup. Says, well, I never got a performance rating the whole time I was under him.
Mm-hmm.
Every year annual deal, I never got one at all. And they said, don't you go. And so that'll ring. And so I just said, I'm not going. I said, that's unethical. I said, I don't have any dealings with the undersecretary. He said, we work for, I said, not me. And so that kindly turned everything. I got everything from sorting the mail assignments to whatever. And then I went in and asked for a transfer to Idaho. I says, whatever you got. And the head of the recreation thing was a good guy. I'm trying to think his name. And he said, he'll find out. And that's when St. Mary's District opened up. And they said, hey, they have a district at St. Mary's. I said, I'm on my way. And that's how we got here. But yeah, that the most corrupt outfit I couldn't believe it.
And so you retired from the Forest Service,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah, right here in St. Mary's. How many years had you spent in St. Mary's?
I think 12 or 13.
Ah, all right.
Yeah,
Okay.
great people. Yeah, that's the most worthless individual I've ever met.
So who was the Forest Service supervisor in Chalice when you were at...
Max Reese,
Okay.
old destroyer sailor out of the Pacific, salt of the earth guy, man. And Duff Ross, tall, lanky B-17 pilot over Europe, 30 missions, was the range staff officer. Mel Hyatt, Marine on Iwo Jima, was the fire and timber staff. And
They were good people to work under.
oh gee whiz, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a lot done, and you know they trusted you to do the job. And then Wes Carlson was about the same as this bill we're talking about. He relieved Max Reese, and the Chalice just went there, and he and I locked horns immediately.
Uh-huh.
You know.
So what was your favorite assignment in the Forest Service in your career?
Stanley.
Stanley.
I had 3 other districts. I think I've had 4 or 5 ranger districts. I refused their, and well, the last one, year on the forest plan. See, then I got an assignment to the Indian Junior College at Lawrence, Kansas, to set up resource things there. And that was a good assignment, but it was like getting fired. Because the forest plan, you know, these plans that are forever, that they set on their butt with 9 computers. And my guys, when we started getting them, I said, you better come in with pitch in your hair. And I don't want to see you on this flex time or whatever it is. We have a job to do and we camped all winter. We camped. I had an old picture off of Potato Mountain, and we didn't snowshoe out until about 6 feet of snow on Christmas Eve and laid out that timber sale. J.C.B. was a young forester, and Bill and Frank and I, and went back, snowshoed in after Christmas, all the way past about 7 miles to it, and couldn't find camp.
Uh-oh.
There's this much of the stovepipe sticking in, and Frank said, "Hey, there's the stovepipe."
Buried.
But anyway, and my guys here, every one of my districts, I said, guys, I've slept in frozen holes in the ground that you don't even want to know about. So don't tell me. And I wouldn't, they said, nowadays I'd be probably locked up. But guys show up with sleeping bag in the summer to go, because we'd stay overnight in the woods wherever the trail were. Said, leave those behind. I said, you don't need those. I said, they're going to be in our way.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll show you how to sleep under trees, which is, under the white fir, it always has a lot of needles and sweeping branches, just like a tent. And the Marine Corps would scrape all that away, keep it burned, lay down, and then cover yourself back
up.
And you've got a blanket, you can sleep. I said, it'll shed water and work. So that's the way my guys learned to camp on and then get up and go work.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, I wasn't, we did that to one of the staff in Coeur d'Alene and about killed him.
That's
And
fabulous.
now they sit behind a computer and nothing wrong with computers, but if you don't know that ridge and you don't know what's on it, the aerial photos are the best thing that you need. I said, that's the only thing you need. You get trained, you get travel time, because in the Marine Corps we figure our travel time, how much it's going to take us to hump to here and here. But that was to keep alive. I said, this is slightly different. So anyway, yeah, I had a great bunch here. But when I told the supervisor and the regional bunch that we have a forest plan, me and my guys made one for the district based on age classes and growth, because my guys knew every blasted thing, and we figured no logging above 4,500 feet, period, because that's the taper factor got to be a needle. I said it's going to cost more to log it. The road construction is too costly, and that is strictly for whatever God intended it for. And if we can't get enough timber out of what's below that, we shouldn't be logging it. And they says, well, and supervisor and we said, well, you will approve this plan for that. Says, we don't need your plan. Yours is only a component of it. And I said, well, it's our component. And well, anyway, I told a lot of the things that they were predicting. I said, what is it based on? I said, that isn't right. Here's what my guys have on plots that we have kept over the years, and the growth rates, etc., the water runoffs. And so anyway, said, well, we have an assignment for you due to your background and stuff. The Indian College has requested. I said, okay. I said, Dad, I'm out of here. I said, I'm through. I said, I'll take this assignment, but I'm retiring.
Yeah, yeah.
So I went to Haskell, a bunch of Zuni kids and everything, and take them in the woods at night, and camp at night, and blindfold them. Tell me, write it up, only what you heard. What'd you hear? I said, you guys forgot how to listen. I said, that's your problem. I said, there's nothing wrong with the towns and stuff you live in, but if you forgot. So anyway, I had a great time. I was there 2 years, I guess, at Haskell Junior College.
Okay. So, going back to Stanley just a little bit more, talk a little bit more about the community relations between the Forest Service and the local community.
Fantastic. We could, like I say, they could borrow my mules. You know, if the guy got meat down or something and couldn't get his out, we wasn't gonna let that meat spoil. So, yeah, we saddle up a horse and a mule and head to Hay Creek, where is, you know, where Hay Creek is.
Basin Creek, up Basin Creek, you bet I do.
Yeah, that's good elk
Yep,
country back
yep.
in there.
Oh, it's all burned off.
Yeah, things like that. And the range allotment problem with the salmon beds, with the sheep allotments was big from the sheep driveway. And the credit goes to Senior J.C., the supervisor of the Sawtooth, for starting the closure of that 300-mile sheep drive.
Mm-hmm.
That went all the way, mud and the creeks and whatever. And we participated in that, and Bob Newcomer, the ranger before me, had started the overgrazing situation on 26 sheep allotments there on the Stanley district. And I picked up on them, and that was a hornet nest. But there again, I found by riding and working with the Basque, most of the Basque herders,
Mm-hmm.
great guys. Didn't quite, what took a while to get used to their big pot of boiled ripe tomatoes and eggs, all in there boiling together. And you fish out an egg or a ripe tomato and stuff they brought up from Twin Falls. And those were, the guys out of Haley, I know him, so I'll do my own name. And of course, Bill Jones, still, he's 92 now, I still hear from him. But in riding with them, the same thing I learned years before on the Utah district, get to know those guys. And your horse is kicking up dust on the allotment on the hillside, there's not enough grass to hold it. And just the things that they could see, and the only one that gave me any spitting contest, so to speak, well, Bill Brailsford was another sheep allotment, and
Mm-hmm.
horse guy, super guy. And so I just rode with them and rode with their herders and everything. And not Floyd Silva, but Ben Oneida at Shoshone.
Mm-hmm.
He had a sheep allotment, it was Jack Lavin's sheep allotment.
Okay.
And I accused Jack all the time of bugging out in the winter and heading to Haley. He wintered in Haley, or Ketchum, and left the valley. Good buddy, but anyway, he thought he was funny. I didn't. And so I got Ben Oneida sheep allotment to manage for him. And in riding with them, with their herders, because here again I learned the ranchers didn't ride with their allotments. They didn't know their allotment.
Mm.
And so when I took them out horseback on it, they'd get lost in a drugstore. And they did not like that. But it made a message to them that I halfway knew the country. And so whenever it came time, I said, well, guys, we can't keep running sheep in this, and the salmon beds at Knapp Creek and all that spawning ground are filling up. You're right through here, what do you see? And so, yeah. And so I just worked out a deal. I'd give them 20% a year for 5 years. I said, overgrazing didn't happen overnight. And you shouldn't be asked to take a reduction in your sheep or cattle operation overnight. So I said, and just talking with them, figured out how much at home time do you need for hay and how many feeding and so forth. And I said, well, then would 20% a reduction a year fit with your home operation? He said, yeah. I said, we could work with 20%. Said, okay. Then when the 100% is 5 years. So 5 years in a worked agreement, all of them signed it with also the condition, if at any time you want to use all of it, go ahead and use all of it, but at the end of 5 years, it's zero. And they all signed it, and I took it down to Ben Oneida in Shoshone, And I didn't know Ben as well as I did Brailsford and all these other guys, because I'd never ridden with him. He wouldn't ride, which said a lot to me. But went in and they were polite, and I sat at the kitchen table, and she had some coffee cake things, and we sat there and talked a while and visited about history. And he signed it. He said, well, he says, yeah, I can see. The other guy said, yeah, we're going to lose everything there and so forth, yak, yak. And so I left, and he had a good sheepdog. As I started to open the gate, and I swear to this day, I believe Ben sicked that dog. I mean, so the dog grabbed me by the butt. Of course, I wear, riding boots, and he grabbed my top of my boot, and I never looked back. I just opened the gate and kind of kicked him loose and walked onto the pickup. And I know Ben was standing watching in the kitchen window how well his dog worked. But he signed it, and 5 years, all the sheep are gone except Bill Jones isn't here. Me and Bill James and Frank, I got in trouble. They didn't, because we had a new supervisor, Wes Carson, worthless.
Mm.
And Bill had private ground there.
Yes, yes.
And we said, gosh, all these Knapp Creek meadows and stuff, we said, if we could grow more grass on this, and Bill said, well, I could get fatter lambs without running up and down the ridges and so forth. And so he knew how to make irrigation ditches. We didn't. So, okay, Bill, lay out these grades. And so we got tractor and plow and made irrigation ditches all through there, and cut out a whole bunch of lodge pole for the poles for corrals and whatever, and seeded it. And it was like a hayfield across there. And old Wes Carson came up, and first off, I didn't have a budget for that. And I said, how about moonlit light? And I'd just say anything to tick Carlson off. But, well, what do you mean? I said, well, all of this was, he said, this is federal ground, this is Forest Service, says we don't make pastures. And I said, well, we make, I'd come off heavy range districts in Utah. I said, we'll make spring boxes, and we mow sagebrush, and we spray sagebrush all over everywhere. I said, this is just the irrigation ditches. And we have water. I said, the fish and game. Samuel said, we don't see a problem with that. And Bill Jones, to this day, I got to tell you, he might be died last year, but he made 100 pounds more on every sheep and pulled plumb off of the slopes.
I know where those ditches are.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely, I know where those ditches are.
Well, that's how they got there. I didn't care about performance ratings anyway from Wes Carlson, but anywho, that's how those ditches got there.
I'll be darned. Well, Harold, I would say you accomplished one heck of a lot in that Sawtooth Salmon River country.
Good
amazing.
People. Good people.
Yeah.
We had great people. No, like I say, all the guys, all the ranchers, well, Shiver's name was still, well, Eileen, she's in a nursing home. Tom died.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And John got killed later on a snowmobile.
Mm-hmm. We did an oral history on Tom and Eileen. I was always really good friends with both of them.
Oh, yeah, they just, and all the people, of course.
Did you get along with Piero Piva?
Oh, yeah, he and I, we had a great time. Oh, Bruno was the one that, he would never change his watch time to mountain time. Bruno kept the same time, and he was always either early or late for whatever we was going to do. And everybody knew, well, Bruno, forget that. But yeah, his boy, Piero's boy, Jimmy, worked for me on the Middle Fork a lot, and he was killed in Vietnam.
Right, yeah.
I went down for his funeral.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jimmy was a great kid.
Yeah.
No, and Mrs. Piva, what? Her name, her family. Her dad was a doctor.
Your favorite Piva?
And Julian.
Yeah, did you know Julian Piva?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I see on my horse channel, Ruger Piva, kid riding bulls,
Mm-hmm.
and he looks like Marion. He looks like Marion Piva.
Uh-huh.
And I'm gonna ask Bill and June if that is his dad. Cause he's a Piva, there's no doubt about
Yeah,
he's Piva.
yeah.
And
yeah.
the girls, one of them worked for me at, on campground stuff. What girl was her? Julie? Was it Julie, the oldest daughter?
Might be,
The
yeah.
oldest daughter of Piero, yeah, Piero, and I nearly had her, her name, but yeah, I'd go down, we'd work cows down at his place and sorting and everything. And,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Was it Mabel?
Mabel Piva.
Mabel?
Abel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mabel.
Abel, yeah.
Mabel Piva.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the only trouble I had, really hardly ever has been within
Mhm.
the outfit.
Yeah, yeah.
That's only, yeah, Wes Carlson, man, oh, yeah, we impounded Stan Tappan's whole string of mules and horses off of the Middle Fork and drove them out at Moonlight.
Uh-huh.
Me and JPV and Frank and Bill James. And we told Stan, you quit. Well, Chivers had come and said, Stan's running these horses at night along the Stanley Basin. And he had a kid hired in Stanley to get them at daylight, so nobody would see them. So I collared Stan one day and I said, Stan, you got to quit doing this. I said, it's going to run into the ground on you. I said, I know what in the thunder you're doing. And he said, oh, he says, well, I'm out in these woods as much as you are. Kind of a threat. And the same thing, I said, don't miss, Stan. I said, it's the only thing I got to tell you. And I said, your horses are coming off of there. So anyway, he moved them back over down Rapid River, and he had Bill Goose, the old McCall Ranch, down in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told the guys, well, we'll wait till full moon till we can ride all night, because it's going to take all night to get them out of there. And so we did. We saddled up, we waited, and there's Stan's tent, the lantern. We sat on the ridge and wait, and the lantern gets turned off. And we knew he had a couple of rifles, and he would shoot you. Stan would shoot you in the back. That's the way Stan Tappan.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we waited, pretty sure he's asleep. And so we rode down, and I could hear the bell mare. I could hear the bell. And I said, okay, guys, I'll get the bell. Then y'all flank out and start moving them up. Well, I got down there, the daggum bell mare stumbled, kind of in the swamp, and the bell clang, clang, clang a little louder. And the belt strap was wet, and I couldn't get the tongue. So I just grabbed a handful of moss and mud and shoved in the belt to stop the clapper.
Yeah, yeah.
And then hooped. And the guys had the horses and mules headed south. And we got up on the ridge, and all the guys, hoo-ah, and out the lantern comes on.
Mm-hmm.
Stan found the matches, and we let him walk. That took him, it was 3 days later, Stan came in to Stanley really ticked.
He had to walk out?
Yeah. And we just left him in there. Yeah, there's no way, because he'd catch us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we'd have to kill him, or do something. No, we left him in there. And he tried all over. We had all of his horses and mules in the corral. They were fat and happy, eating good hay and that. And he went everywhere to Stanley to get a loan to pay for the impoundment and the grazing. Nobody'd loan him money.
Ah.
So he hitched a ride to Twin Falls. And here's where Wes Carlson and Norm Hack, the range guy, both of them were just alike. They said I had illegally impounded his stock, and I would, because there's a 10-day waiting period on impoundments, and that I had to turn them all loose.
So they didn't stand behind you.
And so, man, that was a bitter. You had a white mule. He had good stock. They'd line up at the cattle guard wanting to come in to force us to eat.
Yeah.
We said, we can't get rid of that but stock. They want to get impounded. And then, but the word got to the regional office in Ogden, and Duff Ross was down there. He had been replaced by Norm Hack. And Duff hit the ceiling and says, "What are you guys out of your mind? You don't know this outfitter, or so-called outfitter, and what those guys went through to get that." He said, and besides, he called and checked on the dates of advertisement and notification. My verbal notification was sufficient, and I could swear to it, you know, on a Bible.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "What else you need from that ranger?" He says, "You guys made a big mistake and has put them in jeopardy." And the voice says, "Go get them."
All right. Boy, yeah.
Yeah, me and Norm Hack, man, I couldn't threaten him visually or verbally, or probably get locked up. But well, he knew to stay away from Stanley. Yeah, he knew you don't come to Stanley.
So did you know the Demerists in the Diamond D in Loon Creek? Did you have a guard down there in Loon Creek?
Yeah.
The Boyles had the Diamond D ranch, and then the Demerists had it, and I just wonder which you might have known in there.
Well, the Voles, Ella, you know, worked for me. I didn't know her family. I just knew of them.
Okay.
And she was crippled. She had back arthritis and really bent over. You know, it's difficult for Ella to do things, but she's always cheerful. It never seemed to bother her.
That down there in Loon Creek, the dock, is it Dock Hatch? Down at the lower place on Loon Creek, but the Demerists or the Boyles owned the Diamond D ranch there. Okay. And then the guard station there. Do you remember who the guard was at in Loon Creek?
No, I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering because there was, when I first came on, there was a really old gentleman and his wife that were running the Loon Creek guard station, and I can't remember their names to save me. And I just wondered if you knew it.
Yeah. I think that's a picture of him bringing the mules across the Little Creek Bridge.
Ah.
On the Middle Fork. That's right at Little Creek.
Yeah, yeah.
It's nearly a Mexican name. What was his? Yeah, I know it, but I can't.
Yeah, I can't put the name back in my head, but they were really, really nice people. And I've been trying to remember for a long time the name of those folks.
Yeah, a lot of those names have slipped.
Yeah.
They've slipped, but Shorty Conyers, back to Shorty.
Now, Shorty was a packer, isn't that right?
Yeah, and fire control.
And fire control, both, okay.
Ed Udell was the packer, really.
Oh, okay, okay.
But yeah, Shorty's in the nursing home at Salmon when I phoned Bill in June after I came back from Vietnam. And said, where's Shorty? He said, well, he's in the nursing home.
Yeah.
And so I went by Bill and June's to pick up my horses. They'd kept my horses. And so me and my boy, who was home on leave from Marine Corps, and one boy. And so we pulled in there to see Shorty, and the nurse says, well, he doesn't talk. He never talked very much unless you got on his subject. But says and he probably won't know, he doesn't have many family that visits him. Well, he had a brother that younger, but anywho, we went in and said, well, he's sitting in the sunroom. So we went in, and I walked up behind him where they had him sitting, and I said, Shorty, and he kindly picked it, I said, have you ridden old Pete lately? That's that riding mule of his. And I've got a picture of Shorty on old Pete. And he turned around and I walked in front, big old grin on his face. And we just started from the last day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, he he remembered everything.
Mm-hmm.
From the old boy. He says, yeah, and he left the cabin clean. And that was the difference in the guys always used to laugh about, you know which side of the Packers cabin is Shorty's and which one is Ed Goodale's.
Mm-hmm.
Ed was as neat, clean, everything was organized. Shorty's, Manny's were stacked over here. The sawbucks or Deckard stacked there, and his hat and his shoes, one sock over here. And yeah, it was, we should have taken a picture. I mean, it just hit you right in the face as soon as you open the door. But yes, old Shorty knew, he didn't know Neil. I introduced Neil to him. And yeah, we just went right back to the last day. He knew me, and just big old grin on his face.
Wonderful.
And so I bid him farewell. And
Yeah.
of course, he died, I think, 6 months later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great guys. And that's why Bill and June said on that painting downstairs, said that's Shorty, except Pete isn't there. Had a saddle horse.
Yeah.
Now, Shorty wouldn't ride a horse.
Good for him. Good for him.
Yeah.
We were mule people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we had a great bunch. I've never had a bad district. I've had some bad supervisors. But only on one forest. So I got to back up on that. Wasatch was great.
Mm-hmm.
But it all goes back to this, and of course I'm very, very indoctrinated and prejudiced on this. Whereas nearly all those others, I think back, they were all out of the military somehow.
All the ones that were really top notch.
Every one of them were veterans of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just made all the difference in the world. And nowadays the guys, if I rent, they say, don't ask. They said you don't want to know.
Yeah. Well, I think we probably have